All right, so here we are. We have only one more video to go after this one. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna now go from this, which is we left off where we did the clear coat white glue. And then we also used some of the tinted glue, that brown tinted glue from a couple of steps ago. And we've covered the entire model with it and we've let it dry completely. So what you should have is something that looks like this. This is kind of just this completely sealed model. And now it's time to use the weathering powders. And what do the weathering powders do? Well, here's this. Here's the unfinished part. And then over here, I already did some of the model, and you can see what the weathering powders do. It just brings it absolutely alive. So you go from this to this. And you can see I did the same thing on this model. So the weathering powders give it that depth and richness and all of that. By the way, there's a couple of things I'd like to point out. So we also made all these rocks a few steps ago, and I made several others, and we have other rocks here. These are awesome rocks that you can use for another project. So what you do is when you make them on that cookie sheet, they're nice and flat, and now they'll be perfect for another diorama, okay? So, I mean, that's kind of a cool thing to do. And also, there's still plenty left over, so I put the remainder of that into this, and this will keep for a good month, 5 weeks. So you've got plenty of that great plaster of Paris to use for other projects, rocks, buildings, you know, whatever you want. So that stuff keeps very well. So I thought I'd maybe mention it at this time. So, you know, keep the things that you make and have them available for other projects, because you know, sometimes you can save yourself a lot of time. And now I've got a few extra rocks to use for the next diorama. So having said that, I'm going to pull the camera back a little bit. It's time to talk about the weathering powders. So how do you go from this to this? It's pretty easy. What you use are these weathering powder kits. Now I've got two different kinds here. They're both do the same thing. Okay. So the Tamiya one here with the stars on it, that's an imported one. And then here, this is the sort of the generic version that I bought from Hobby Lobby, but they do exactly the same thing. They have rust, soot, snow, metal, silver, all different kinds. Here's one here that I'm finishing up, and this has sand, different colors of sand and grime, and so these are fantastic. And what you do is you go find your significant other's makeup kit, if they have such a thing, and you steal one of these little brushes out of their kit, right? And these makeup brushes are absolutely ideal for making and doing the weathering powders. So first of all, there's one more step before we get to the weathering powders, and that is the rocks. So I left two rocks unfinished here, okay, to show you how to do it. So what I did was I just took some gray paint and I put it on this foam brush. By the way, this is the same foam brush I've used throughout the entire project. If you take good care of them and wash them out, they'll last. So what I want to do is, as you can see on even some of these on the other one, there's sort of a gray and black tint and hue to it. So the way you get that is you take the surface and it's just sort of tapping the top of it, okay? Just tap the top of the rock. You don't have to go crazy with it, just enough. And that kind of just gives it a weathering to that rock, okay? And so if you do that, there's plenty of negative space. There's still a lot of the rust orange color coming through underneath. And you just let that sit for a minute, okay? Because now we're gonna start applying some of the weathering powder to the edge and to the interior. So what you do is you pick any spot and you take your weathering powders. Now, I think for this model, I'm going to go with the rust first, all right? So this is a beautiful color, and you're going to take it, you're going to load the brush like that. Just get some rust on there. And you're going to go over the rust that's already there, that initial base color. But what it does, I think you're going to start to see that it blends things together. All right. So very quickly, it takes some of that edgy rust color off, and it starts to smooth things out like that. You want to, you know, this is where you can kind of let your mind wander. There's no right or wrong way to apply the weathering powders. You're going to develop your own style with this, okay? But what you're going to notice is that very quickly it goes from this rather harsh, you know, untreated part, and then it starts to soften. All right, starts to soften, and then what you can do is take other weathering powders. Now we're going to go with maybe some of this sort of medium gradient sand color. We're going to load it up with that, and watch what this does. You're going to find maybe like the edge, and you're going to go along the edge, and it just immediately brightens it, and it adds a lot of variation. All right, and then you just kind of go over that rust, and what it does is it starts to make those rocks pop out, you know, the small rocks that we made, and it really starts to look interesting. And you know what I like to do is I like to leave some of it very bright, some of it goes darker, but especially along the edge, you want to sort of define the edge, because we spent all that time making this really cool sort of raw edge, and that really helps it out. Okay, and then what you can do is you can take even the lighter stuff, and you can then hit it further still, and it will lighten it up even further. All right, making sure to leave plenty of dark areas. You mix the dark areas and the light areas, and you just lightly go over it. Okay, now when it comes to the rocks, take yourself, maybe go back into the rust, and again you just sort of load the brush with that weathering powder, and now watch what it does to the rock. It starts to soften and blend it. Right, it's no longer that harsh gray that we had before, and now there's almost there's a kind of a subtleness to it. All right, you hit that one too. All right, and then go back and repeat the same thing. Then go with that sand color maybe. But this is just how I do the rocks. I've never seen a rock in nature that came out wrong, right? So, you know, work with a color palette that you kind of like. You know, obviously we're going with red as kind of the theme of this one, but you're not going to mess up rocks. The rocks are going to be exactly how they should be for you, all right? And that's the fun about doing it and not building them on a 3D printer or something, is each rock is going to be your own. It's your own creation. And you just keep working at it until you get them where you want. But that's kind of gives me almost like a weathered appearance, right? And then every now and then maybe go with this sort of grime color, this darker one, and just sort of load half of the brush and kind of go over it. And you'll see it starts to make things pop out a little bit. The dark features of the rocks pop forward, and you'll start to see. So just keep working on it. And if you don't like it, just go back to the rust and repeat the process until you get the rock to where you want it. All right. And again, you know, like, I don't know, like I said, there's no wrong rocks. So you know, that's kind of what you do. Then all of a sudden, when you look at it, you're like, oh yeah, look at that. That's its own rock, you know? So just keep repeating. You don't have to watch me do the whole thing, but the rest of this model, just continue with the weathering powders and this brush. Get it to where you want. Now, again, I like to have variation along the edge. That's what I've done with this one as well. That edge really starts to pop. You know, there's all kinds of different color variants and gradients and textures and things. So just continue on with this process, and then I will see you for the last step.